Hey guys, Eclipse14 here, and it's time for part 3 of the PlayStation Collection. We got the third set of 17 in something that I would dub the Squaresoft set, because 16 of the 17 games are from Squaresoft, which is a very good company that made a lot of really good games on the 4th and 5th generation. I wish I had 17, but, it's just how it rolls. There's not too many Squaresoft games that I am missing, though, so I might pick them all up at some point. But I do know one's going to be a pain in the neck, and I wish I got that as early as I was able to. But oh well, stuff happened. The rest is the rest. I'll pick it up at some point. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this thing started, shall we? And we can't talk about PlayStation and Squaresoft without talking about the grand masterpiece that is Final Fantasy VII. Now, I have a particular Black Label version copy. However, this is not a misprinted copy, which is a thing in the form of the back case, in which the word masterpiece, the first E would be glitched out and broken from the paragraph. This is a corrected version, so that's unfortunate. This was, I think this was 18 bucks or something like that when I got it, because it was originally like 35 or something like that, and it was a half off thing or something. I don't really remember how much I paid for it, but anyway, it is the only other 3-discer I own in my entire collection. The other one was Galarians from the second episode. There's the airship book, which is a very nice piece of work in itself. And if I can pull this out, Disc 2 and Disc 3. It took me quite a while for me to actually finish this game, but it wasn't simply because that I just didn't know what to do. It was a period of long periods of off and short periods of on, all the way to the end of the game. The one thing that disappointed me the most was how short Disc 3 was, featuring only, story-wise, only the final dungeon and just the couple extras that's there. Which kind of sucks because there's quite a bit of material that you could do on that third disc. And that's really the only thing that irked me. But yeah, I did manage to eventually beat this game, but it took quite a while because I was just doing an off and on run thing. If I didn't beat this game, that'd be pretty freaking weird, wouldn't it? But there's not much to say about Final Fantasy VII. It's an excellent game. It's getting a remake soon, and that's all that needs to be said. It's a piece of work in its own right, and I've got it, and I managed to finish it, and that, for me, that's really all that matters. It's a good game, and I enjoyed it. And following 7 comes 8. Now, out of the 3 mainline PlayStation Final Fantasy games, 8 is the only one that I have yet to finish. I got somewhere into Disc 1, ended up getting screwed up somewhere, and I just never went back to it. It wasn't that I actually screwed up in some boss fight or something. It's just I got lost and just didn't know how to progress onto a certain place and then moved on. So that was the biggest problem with this thing. Anyway, I hope I can get to it at some point, but I just never got around to it. So there's Disc 1 and the booklet. Inside there is Disc 2. I'm going to flip this around for the mini walkthrough, and under that is Disc 3. And finally, you got Disc 4. The mini walkthrough here is, it's actually a small Birdie Games guide, which goes all the way up to, Christ, it's not too long. I think it's like Ifrit's the main boss fight. Yeah, getting Ifrit, and that's how it is. I actually do have the strategy guide for this, the actual strategy guide for the game, but it is nice to have a mini walkthrough that came out that covers the first part of the game, and you're on your own. But yeah, I still have yet to actually complete the game. I would like to get to it at some point in time, but right now it's not super high on the priority list. And of course, following 8 comes 9. Now, the instance that I did play and complete this game, I actually owned a Greatest Hits version of this game. I actually got this Black Label long after I sold that Greatest Hits version. My problem with 9, I actually really liked the game, but my disc condition was absolutely horrific. Well, not really. Disc 1 and 2 actually turned out pretty fine on that Greatest Hits version, but Disc 3 was when crap hit the fan. So I got Disc 1 there, the book, if I can pull it out, there's Disc 2. There it is. And there's the Play Online strategy guide thing. insert, and there's disc 3, and finally there's disc 4. Now, disc 3 on my greatest hits copy, when I beat the game, I don't know what exact... Whoa, holy crap. Oh, right, this one has some arms broken off of this one, so I should have been a little more cautious on this one. Need to find a better copy of this game. Disc 3 was bugged out in the battle scenes. So every, like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something like that, it would become difficult to get an enemy, it would be difficult to get a battle to spawn. Sometimes the screen would show up and no characters would render. Sometimes it would take a long time just for the screen to render at all. It took a lot of opening and closing the door, resets, and all sorts of crap. It made for a pretty miserable experience until I got to Disc 4. And Disc 4 did the same thing to a much lesser extent, but it happened on occasion. So as soon as I completed the game, I ended up selling it quickly, and I found a black label copy that honestly I need to find a better looking one of these. This is just here mostly for collection purposes. But I did enjoy 9 from what I remember, but those bugs definitely left a sour taste in my mouth. I should give it a try once I find a better copy. Next up, we have Final Fantasy Tactics. Now, Final Fantasy Tactics is one that I've played quite a few times and attempted to beat over the years. I completed it twice and tried to complete it 5 times in total. The first initial time, I don't remember what exactly happened, but 2 of the times I ended up completely losing on one of the most critical fights of the game, which respectfully is one of the most difficult ones, and if you save before that fight, you pretty much screw yourself big time, and that's what I ended up doing. So, to make sure I circumvented that the last time I beat this game, I made 2 separate files in order to continue. There's the disc, everything looks fine, and this is a game that I would like to play on the channel at some point in time, because I do have a lot of fun with this one, and my last particular session was pretty exciting. And I would like to give this a try at some point in time for the channel. Hopefully I won't have too many big issues, but I'm expecting quite a few nitpicks on the way there. Because there are quite a couple battles that definitely pissed me off, and I know that when I play this on the channel, I'm going to have the same irks that I did playing it the last couple times. Following that, I have Final Fantasy Origins, which is, what this actually is an improved graphic update of the first 2 games. In the instance of Final Fantasy II, which was our original Final Fantasy II in the US, this was the very first instance that got played in North America, and was also the first time that it got played in Europe as well. Not sure about Final Fantasy being the first time in Europe also, but actually, yeah, it was, because the first Final Fantasy Europe got was Mystic Quest, so that kind of sucks. But anyway, this one I haven't actually played a whole lot because I've played Final Fantasy II on the NES version through the emulator at one point in time before I picked up this game. And Final Fantasy, I've played the NES version of that so many times that it's just not even funny. Now, the updates actually come from a WonderSwan color port of both games, which were released a couple years before this game came out, exclusively in Japan for the WonderSwan color. And both of those games do their job okay, and these things are basically a console upgrade, which allowed us in the West to actually be able to play these games, especially 2 for the very first time. So I don't have a huge amount to say about it because I've played the NES version of Final Fantasy, and Final Fantasy 2 I've already played on a different system entirely. So I haven't really touched this one all that much, and don't really need to considering I've beaten them enough times. Next off is Final Fantasy Chronicles, which consists of Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger. Now, this game was something that, this was actually the last game that was connected to the Final Fantasy series in some way, shape, or form that I needed to get for the PlayStation. I actually had a number of chances to get this game, including one instance where between this or Dragon Warrior 4, both games were the same price for whatever reason, and I ended up siding on Dragon Warrior 4 because that game was as cheap as I was ever going to pay for it, which was $45. And $45 for this game was kind of high, so I stepped aside on that one. It would be quite a couple years before I would actually find this particular copy. Now, right here, I've got myself the Final Fantasy IV disc, which is okay, the manual, and finally, the Chrono Trigger disc. Now, I haven't touched the Final Fantasy IV disc a whole lot because I'm not the most fond of the 2D version currently because I first played 4 on the DS, and the same goes for Chrono Trigger, which I also played on the DS. I never finished the 3D version of Final Fantasy IV, which is really unfortunate because I was really getting to liking it before I ended up losing my 3DS somewhere, and God knows what the hell happened to it. And Chrono Trigger, I had already completed the DS version at least twice. So I never had the real incentive to actually play the PlayStation version. All I know is this was mostly because I needed to get the last Final Fantasy connected game on the PlayStation. Plus, since I was gifted the strategy guide a couple months before I got this game, I had an even bigger incentive to look for the game. Finally, I found a Black Label copy at a decent price, and the rest is history. And finally, we have the last of the Final Fantasy PlayStation games in the form of Final Fantasy Anthology. Now, in North America's instance, this features Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI. In Europe's case, it's 4 and 5, whereas 6 was actually released as its own game standalone, and some copies had a Final Fantasy X demo, and those things are extremely expensive these days. I think they went equivalent to about 220 to 250 US dollars, conversion rates and everything going on. And Japan actually had a number of their original Final Fantasy games actually set as standalone games. I know 1 and 2 were such. I'm not sure 4 was such. 5 was definitely such. And 6 was definitely such. Now, in the instance of the Black Label version, a few copies of Final Fantasy Anthology come with a music disc, and this one actually has one. I originally bought this as a fairly clean um, greatest hits version, and then I found this copy and exchanged it. So I got Final Fantasy V right there. The manual, I think the disc is behind here. No, it's on the other side. There's the Final Fantasy VI disc, and there is the music disc. This thing is not very common. Definitely not on the greatest hits version, and not on a number of Black Label copies too. It's in fairly good shape. And one thing I will say is that I played a little bit of 6 on this one. Not I've played 6 before on a different system, so I wasn't really incentive on this one. But this was actually the first instance everyone got to play Final Fantasy V, so I definitely played on this one quite a bit. I never did finish it, but I do want to get back to it at some point because what I had played of it, I definitely liked. And one day I'll probably have the incentive to go over both of them. We'll see what happens because I've got other games I really want to. There's other games I want to take a stand at. Next up is Air Guys. Now, Air Guys is Square's attempt at a fighting game, and in this instance, there's a legendary weapon called, well, Air Guys, and there's a tournament going on where everyone is trying to go after it. Now, I do know there are a number of modes on this one, but I've only played this game for maybe 5 to 10 minutes on the standard arcade battle system just to make sure everything worked. It was pretty unusual, to say the least, because it had a role-playing system inside its standard arcade fighting style. So it makes a little bit of an interesting experience, but I never really gave it too big a chance. I really should try it at some point in time to give it a little more variety, but right now it's not too big on the priority list, but probably the real big thing going for it is that it does include characters from Final Fantasy VII, and some of them are playable outright, others require certain conditions. So, whatever the case may be, it's not super high on the priority list to play, but I might give it a shot as a gameplay test at some point. That's all I gotta say about it. Next off is Chocobo's Dungeon 2. Now, the original Chocobo's Dungeon was also on PlayStation, but only exclusive to Japan, so why we didn't get that one, I have no idea, but we got the second one. This is another instance where I only played the game for like 5 to 10 minutes, and this was because it was one of the last games I bought for 2018. And I did not actually get a chance to play the game until many months later because I still didn't have a PS1. I didn't have a working PlayStation or PlayStation 2 at the time. So when I finally got my PS2, I put this in for about 5 to 10 minutes to make sure everything worked. It's an interesting little dungeon crawler. I've seen some gameplay of it, but I noticed my PS2 having a couple issues, so I need to get that thing taken and checked before I go any farther with this game because I don't want it to damage the disc. And the disc condition is actually fairly good, which is why I'm reluctant to play it in the first place. I paid only $20 for it, which isn't too bad, and it's real. All it has been doing is sitting there collecting dust, and it's unfortunate because I've been wanting to play this game for quite a while. Unfortunately, that's going to have to wait. Next up is Front Mission 3, which again, I think the first two were actually Japanese releases. I don't know if any of them were on the Super Nintendo or something beforehand, but I do know the third game was the first one I recognized that we got that was internationally released. And this one is one that I didn't play too much of, mostly because I was reluctant on the fact that it split into two different paths and did not integrate ever again. So that had me in a little bit of reluctance, although I did play it and did have quite a bit of interest in it. Now, my particular copy has some issue in the form of writing and whatnot on the manual for whatever reason. But the whole thought process is that every single piece of a mech has HP, which is really interesting in my regard, because I think that actually would be pretty cool. It's just the split difference in terms of gameplay is kind of what's been keeping me back from playing this thing. I really do want to play it at some point in time, but the reluctance is what actually put me back, and now that I'm not doing so in the instance because of another game that I played on the PS2, I might give this a shot that it really deserves. But whether or not I decide to do it on the computer or not, just for the channel, I can't say for certain. I would like to give the game a chance, though. Next up is Bushido Blade, which is another fighting game, and one that is really, really quick. This is actually an instance of a game where I ended up finishing it. This thing did not take maybe 20 minutes for me to beat. That's how quick the game is. And the reason is because of how the game is designed, where it is literally one single critical blow could be the difference between ending the game. One blow could be the end of the match. And that's pretty much what the intention of Bushido Blade was. It was popular enough to get a sequel, which unfortunately I don't have currently, although I have had interest in it because there is a lot more in it than the first game. I just never got around to picking it up. But the idea of it is actually pretty neat because you got a first-person point of view, and it's all quick-paced, and one move could be the difference between the end of the match or you still fight another day. The story is actually very quick, and as a result, I didn't get a lot of playtime into this one, and maybe I should give it a little look again just to make sure everything's doing alright. But as it sits, it's a very short game, a very fast-paced one, and I definitely like it. I really would love to get Bushido Blade 2. Next is Saga Frontier 2, which unfortunately I don't own the first Saga Frontier for whatever reason. But this was actually the first game in the entire Saga series that I've actually played. And I got more into them in the form of the Final Fantasy Legend games on the Game Boy. This one's one I also didn't really play that much because the art style kind of screwed me up in terms of how to get around places and whatnot. So I never really got involved with this game all too much. Plus, considering it's the second game, I was more reluctant to play it because I wanted to play the first game. That's something I usually do, is try to do trends. Although I don't think the two games really are the same thing. So I don't have a whole lot to talk about this game, although I do have it, and that's really all that matters. I really do want to get the first game, though, because it's weird to have the second game and not have the first. And from what I've actually played on Saga Frontier 2, it actually plays pretty well and is kind of neat, but the art style is what kind of screwed me up in terms of being able to play it effectively. I really should give it a chance at some point, as it's been I think it's been like 2 years or something since I last even put it in the PS2. Next is Legend of Mana, which is one that definitely annoyed me in terms of actually being able to find, because this thing often carried a moderately high price and was also very difficult to get a hold of. This particular disc is actually in very good shape, which increased my reluctance in actually being able to play the game. So I put it in and played maybe an hour of it, but it has a huge branching storyline in terms of quests and whatnot. So I haven't really figured out how to really get around it. I recently ended up getting a strategy guide a couple years after I picked up this game. So, and since then, I haven't actually been able to play the game at all since I had over 2 years without a PS2. So, I don't remember how much I actually paid for the game, but I do remember this thing is like 50, $60 off very frequently. Never have I really seen it go any less than 35 or 40. So it definitely is one of the more moderately priced Squaresoft games. But it's definitely, this one is in especially clean shape, minus this one crack on the jewel case, which I can easily replace. But as it sits, I just haven't really been able to play the game all that much. Although I do want to give it a shot now that I actually have a strategy guide and something that I could actually play it on, even if it does have some problems. Next up is Threads of Fate. Now, as of this current upload time, this is actually my most recent purchase of a game in my entire collection. I actually bought this back in the middle of last July. Today, I'm recording this on August 30th, right just past midnight in this instance. And because of that, I've only been able to play it for so long just to make sure that I actually made sure the game worked. But I trusted this group, so I expected it to work anyway. I tried 8 freaking times in a row to find a copy with the manual because every single time I went to the same shop, it was always the disc in the case. I'd wanted this game for quite some time, but I always make sure I have the case and the book at the very least. If it's got any inserts, then that's cool too. But at the very least, I want it with the manual. So I had to take 8 times. It took 8 different times over the course of since December before I finally was able to find a copy of this game. Probably more than that, and that definitely irked me. So I was really happy that when I found this game, this was definitely a pickup on the spot because of how many times I tried to get it. And I managed to play it for a couple minutes on both sides, and I will say that I am kind of interested. I'm definitely anticipating getting the chance to really play this game because I have been wanting to do so for quite some time. Next up is the excellent Xenogears. Now, unfortunately for me, this is one of the few games in my entire collection that was pre-ordered. As I said, I have only 9 pre-ordered PlayStation games. This one in particular, I originally owned a Greatest Hits version, which I played for quite a little bit before I eventually sold it off, because I wanted to find a Black Label copy of this excellent game. Only problem, though, was that oftentimes I never found it, and other times it was very expensive. So it grew to a point where it was just like, fuck this, just pre-order it online. And unfortunately, this became the only instance of all of my pre-ordered games where the orderer fucked up. When I look for particular copies of a game, I usually look for specific types of bids. And when I find one that I look for, I tell them to search that specific one, and that's how I end up getting all my orders pretty intact. This is the instance where the order fucked up in the form of the fact that what I looked for was a complete version with the manual, and it was actually fairly cheap. This instance, it did not have the manual, but it did have both discs, and it charged me $10 extra because that was the buy it now price, was $10 higher than the one I originally intended, which was $35. So I ended up paying $45 for one without the book. And that really, really irked me because I told him specifically that's what I wanted. And since then, I've actually been looking for a complete copy of Xenogears, I just haven't been around anywhere in a while, so I never have a chance to get around to it. Not that it was any irk, because it was actually my only failure in terms of pre-ordering. Period. So I didn't give it any grudge. This game. When I had my greatest hits version, I never actually did get to finish all the way through disc one, but in this Black Label instance, I did finish the game. It took quite a little bit and put in some effort, but I did finish the game. If I recall correctly, it was the very last PlayStation game I finished before my original PS2, before I got this recent one, went Kahoot. So it definitely gives me some memories, and I definitely really enjoyed the experience. I really wish that the budget didn't go down, though, and Disc 2 didn't get all wonky, but hey, budget is budget, and what could have been very awesome. And the next game is a PlayStation game that had long remained a very personal favorite of mine, and not just the PlayStation Collection, but one of my favorite games, period. And that was that way for a very long time. It's Brave Fencer Musashi. Now, this particular game I actually recognized through a demo disc that I played with Rallycross 2 and Crash Bandicoot Warped and a couple other games. This one in particular caught my eye because it interested me so much, and I played the demo quite a lot of times. And I wanted this thing so bad that I searched in the wild for 4 years before I finally found a copy. Unfortunately, it didn't have the manual, and the case was very screwed up, so I eventually sold it. Then I found a decently priced copy, found another game that was the exact same price, pre-ordered both of them at the same time, and they both came to me on the same exact day. This was $35, by the way, in case you're wondering. And this was mostly because I didn't want to spend 4 years looking for it again, so I ended up pre-ordering a full copy. That's the actual game disc and the manual, and the reason this game is actually a two-discer is because it included Volume 2 of their 1998 collector's CDs, which contained a trial version of Final Fantasy VII, which I played for like 3 minutes to make sure the thing worked and everything. This game is a game that I think I completed it twice, and it is, looking back at it now, it is fairly short in terms of story, but I definitely really enjoyed it, so I did put in a lot of value into this one. And this is definitely one that when I get the chance, I will definitely be playing this on the channel because it remained a favorite of mine for so long, and then after I started picking up more games, it diluted it a little bit, but it still held a pretty good place in my heart because it was one of my early memories that it was one of the few games that I really wanted, and I spent so long trying to find a copy that I eventually pre-ordered it because the game was so rare. Today, it is one of the rarest Squaresoft games, and definitely one of the most expensive ones in the PlayStation library. If I remember it right, these things are regularly over $60, so having paid $35 for it, which was normal at the time, is definitely a relief, and something that I have kept pretty clean to this very day. This is definitely one I want to play on the channel when I get the chance. And that's all my Squaresoft games. But there's one problem. Unfortunately, I covered 16 games and I want to do 17. If I owned an extra Squaresoft game, that would be number 17. If I had to make a choice, it'd be either Bushido Blade 2 or Einhunter. Probably more Einhunter because that is the rarest PlayStation Squaresoft game. It definitely hits over $100. And because it's so unique as a rail shooter, it's something that I really want, and it's one of the top things I want in my PlayStation 1 collection. It's going to be a pain in the neck to get. So because I only have 16 games out of 17, I had to choose one for filler. And the game I chose is Grandia. Now Grandia is, I originally played Grandia 3, which was the first one I played in the series, in which I still have a copy on the PS2, which we'll get to that when I get to it. Grandia, on the other hand, I played this one for, I think, 20 minutes or something like that, and that was mostly because, just to make sure everything worked and all that, this is a two-disc game, but my particular copy, and I didn't notice it until a little more recently, is that the copy is actually is in fairly good shape. Disc 2 remains very, very much untouched. It's like nobody ever touched that. Disc 1 has a very tiny bit of wear, and I didn't get any wear actually trying to play the game. So, I'm a little more reluctant on the conditional reading of it, but I did like 3 enough, and I did play 1 enough to see how the game played, and I really caught my interest. So it's a game that I definitely want to give it a shot when I have the chance. This thing was, I got lucky. I got this game in a huge lot that was like $50 or something like that. So this was technically $10. 5 or $10, whichever it was. I don't remember what I picked up for it, but I picked up a number of games for fairly cheap. And I haven't actually seen the game since. Nowadays, I usually see the game sell for like $50, $60. So I am glad I got this thing when I did. And definitely a game that I do want to try to get a hold of to play when I get the chance to do so. And that is 3 out of 5 that we have covered in our PlayStation collection. Next up is going to be featuring Capcom and Konami games, for the most part. as well as a couple obscurities that'll seek us into the fifth and final section of my PlayStation collection. For whatever reason, this feels a little bit rushed, but upon looking at the time scale and everything, this actually looks a bit normal. Um, yeah, I did feel a little bit rushed on some games, and sometimes I didn't. That was mostly because I either played them for a couple minutes or played until I finished them. Definitely a couple games I do want to give a chance when I get the shot. But these next couple games here, I've played pretty much all the way through, except for a small few, but I'll mention them when I do. Anyway, there's not much else I can really say here. All I gotta say is stay tuned for part 4, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys on the next video.